This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. And for our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. In this episode of The Biggest Table, I discuss the spiritual and communal significance of food with Amy Dolan, host of the Feeding People podcast and founder of Sunday Supper Church. Amy shares her journey of blending her Jewish and Christian traditions, her venture into ministry in the dinner church movement, and her advocacy for food equity. The conversation delves into topics such as the healing power of shared meals, the importance of food access and choice, and practical ways listeners can engage in food justice in their communities. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp. And in this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm joined by Amy Dolan. A little bit about Amy. She is the host of the Feeding People podcast, founder of Sunday Supper Church, and former strategic consultant for the Chicagoland Good Food and Healthcare Initiative. Amy believes that eating together has the power to dispel loneliness, restore dignity, and create joy as we share sacred moments with each other around beautiful tables. Of all the tables she created and hosted, weeknight dinners with her husband Kelly and her pit bull Maddox in their Chicago apartment are her favorite. So thanks for joining me, Amy. It's great to have you as a guest.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and you found me on Instagram, and that's how we've sort of connected in just the past even few weeks. And so again, it's one of the joys of podcasting is you not randomly, but strategically get to meet other cool people who are interested in food and faith in these conversations. And so what's been your journey in this food and faith arena for yourself?
Yes, that's why I was doing some research for my podcast and came across yours. And it was so cool to see so much of the overlap in our stories. Of course, our stories are unique, but so much overlap. And, you know, for me, in my faith and my theology is always connected to food. And so to find other people where those things are true too, I just love. So it's been so nice connecting with you. So nice to be here today.
Yeah.
And yeah, so my journey towards food and faith, I think, you know, all of our lives are just always a journey, right? And always seem, I think, winding and mysterious. And maybe that's the privilege of life. And most days I feel that, like, how did I get here? What's going on? Right.
Right.
But when I really stop and think about the journey of my life and the path of my life to this moment, at least, it really does make sense. And even as mysterious as it feels sometimes, or unknown as the future feels, it feels like it is like there was a path towards where I am now. And that makes me excited to see the path forward. Like, what else will there be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in both a Jewish and a Christian home. My mom is Jewish, my dad is Christian, and we were raised with both of those traditions. And both of those traditions to me carry such sacred tables and rituals around food. You know, in my Jewish family, we celebrated the holidays and it was always centered on food, you know, delicious kugel and challah and brisket. And I have so many memories of being in my great-grandma's, my grandma's, and my aunt's houses with all of that delicious food. And in my Christian family, the same thing. I mean, Easter feasts, Christmas feasts, it's just always about food.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think all of that was in me with those traditions, even from such a very young age. And so when I went to Bible college and graduated and started in ministry, pastoring children and families right away, it's like, even though I wasn't doing food work, it was still there. And I look back now as I was beginning my ministry career and I was newly married, and I just started cooking like as a creative outlet, because maybe you know this, Andrew, but there are some days that pastoring is a little stressful and you need something.
Yes.
You need something at night to kind of unwind and kind of, you know, turn your brain in a different direction. And cooking really became that for me. I had never really been a cook. I didn't really have many skills. And I started watching Food Network shows and reading cookbooks and just trying things out. And every Thursday night, we invited one of our best friends over, and me and my husband and our best friend would just eat whatever I experimented with that day. And it was such a surprising delight to find this creative outlet in food. And I thought, oh, this is really a way to unwind, to transition, to kind of shake off the stress from the day and just express something of myself in a different way than I had been during the day. And then the reward of it all, to sit down with loved ones and them enjoy it and talk about it and connect, was just, it just opened up my whole mind and body towards what else could food be? What else could gatherings be? And so there, my ministry career led me to founding a dinner church in Chicago, where we created a church environment around tables on Sunday nights where we fed people. And through that, I met local Chicago farmers and food policy experts and food pantry workers who all helped us connect their food and their resources with what we were doing at the dinner church. And that work is what led me to where I am now in food equity in Chicago, really advocating and supporting the work of so many in this city who are doing things to create greater access for people towards food.
Wow. No, it sounds like a delightful, like you said, a mysterious journey, but full of surprises and goodness. And something you touched on is a theme I don't know if I keep hearing, but it seems prevalent in the past few episodes, of this use of food as a way of grounding you, or embodiedness. You used sort of the theme as you were cooking after coming home from ministry. So what was it about food after a long day of ministry, which is very taxing? What was it about food that helped unwind or maybe transition you or get you in touch with something different than ministry was allowing you to?
Yeah. There's something about cooking, I think, that really demands your attention. It demands your full attention in a way that other things I was doing during the day. I mean, obviously everything demanded my attention, but it was like in cooking, especially as I was just beginning and experimenting and trying things and learning, you just really can't look away for a second, right?
No.
You can't look away. You can't check your phone. You can't have other conversations. You just, you have a singular focus. And there was something about that for me that really transitioned my mind from the day, from the stress. Sometimes, if it had been a specifically stressful day in ministry, I would kind of obsess a little bit over in my head. I should have said that differently. I should have done that differently. And cooking just didn't allow for that. Cooking was just it grounded me in the present. I have to be here. Otherwise, this is not going to work out.
Yes.
And so I loved that. And it was just such a different way of being and thinking. And now, my therapist said this to me recently. She said, how dogs complete their stress cycle by shaking their bodies off. So a dog has every time, finishes a walk or whatever, just does a full shake. And that's to complete the stress cycle, to say that is what I just did is over and I'm moving on. And humans need that too. Humans need to complete those stress cycles in order to acknowledge what happened, move that energy and move to the next thing. And so recently my therapist and I were talking about additional ideas at the end of a day for completing the stress cycle, just a walk and she said, cooking is your completion of the stress cycle. It's like you're so physical in your body as you're chopping, cooking, moving, running around the kitchen, opening the fridge, that it's like without even realizing it, you're just shaking it all off and then turning your mind towards what is. And I love that. I now think of it that way. I receive it that way. Cooking at the end of a day just feels like such a gift to myself. And then once I am really rooted in the present and able to turn my mind towards if I'm cooking for someone or if guests are coming over that night, then I can turn my attention towards them, and my body is just filled with love. And as you're chopping and making things for people you love, there's no better feeling. But it's like you got to shake off the day, complete all that stress, and then you can think towards, oh, people I love are coming for dinner, and I'm making something great for them. And cooking has done all those things for me.
No, I love that idea, and I just want to invite our listeners to consider their own. What do you need to do to complete your stress cycle through the
Yes.
day? And I know it's a great reminder for me because I'm coming back from work, and many times I'm coming home to my kids and my wife, and so how do I transition and to be
Yes.
present? Because one of your big things was it helped you be present in the moment, which then enabled you to be more present with people around you.
Yes.
To clear your mind of ministry. And so, yeah, just for you listeners, consider what might be your stress relief, your stress shake for the
Yeah.
day. And maybe it's
Yeah.
after the kids go to bed if you have kids, but how can mealtime be a transition moment for you to be more present to the people at your table like it was for
Mm.
Amy here?
That's
Uh,
nice. Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to, cooking can be like a lengthy process. So that can be one way, but also like a stress cycle can literally be like shaking your body off before you walk in the door to your family, or taking a deep breath, or one more
mhm.
walk around the block. It can be, and I forget that, like, it doesn't have to be a whole event. It
No.
can also just be something. My dog shakes off I actually take that as cue now. When he shakes off, I just take it as opportunity to shake too. I'm like, why not?
Yeah. No. Yeah, no, I think it's just that physical reminder, like that
Yeah.
we're embodied creatures
Yes.
and have been created embodied, and yet we want so often to not pay attention to what our body needs in
Yes.
order to be
Right.
more present. And so I love that reminder from you about food as a moment to relieve stress.
Hmm.
So random question: as you were exploring food and you're having a friend over on Thursday, were there any epic fails like that you remember that you can maybe you cried them at the moment because I've been there, but now you laugh about?
I mean, I just feel like in those early days, there were so many. There were so many. And the memory I have always is how gracious my husband and friend were. I was just trying everything and anything. There were no limits to what I was trying. And I think that actually is so key when you're learning to cook. Like, you got to practice. Practice makes perfect. And
Right.
also, practice makes you aware of what your style is. Everyone has a cooking style and preference.
Hmm.
And now I know that so clearly because of all of those experiments, because of all of those tries. I think about Rachel Ray had a turkey meatloaf that looked so delicious. And it was like right before Thanksgiving when I was in this experimenting new cook phase. And they were like these little tiny mini turkey meatloaves you put in like little tiny bread pans. And I was like, that sounds amazing. I had never made a meatloaf. I had barely cooked meat. And I was like, I love like a little spin on something, like a little
Right.
crate. I'm like, it's not just a regular meatloaf. It's mini. It has turkey. It's so
Yeah.
exciting. And I'm not totally sure what happened exactly, but I always think of that. I'm like, that was something else. So, and you can only pour so much gravy over a meatloaf to hide
Yes.
all of its sins inside. But I'm pretty sure my husband and friends still ate it, which was so kind, because who knows what was happening in there. But I always think of that meatloaf when I think of those days.
Yeah. No, and it's great that you have friends and a husband that will be gracious. And
Yeah.
if something fails, we can always order pizza, like,
I
you
mean, and
know,
we did that. Yes.
that's awesome. So then as you honed your cooking style, what developed? Like who is Amy in the kitchen now after however many years it is?
I love that question. Thank you for that. I like simple. I like few ingredients. I like comfort and nourishment. I love vegetables. My husband is plant-based, and
Hmm.
so a lot of nights we have mostly plant-based meals. I eat animal meat though, so if I make him a tofu version, I make myself a chicken version, or
Yeah.
But I like it. I like few ingredients. I like simplicity. I like depth of flavor. And I don't love a lot of time. Like I want it to be 30 minutes on a weekday, 40 minutes at best. And I want to make it, I want to think about it, and I want to be able to serve something really beautiful and really delicious, but not too complicated. And yeah, I really love I love shopping my farmer's market on Saturday and then letting those ingredients dictate our
Hmm.
menu for the week. That is the most rewarding thing to me. I'm so annoying when we sit down to dinner and I say, that salad is from Gorman Farms.
Right.
That dessert is from, I just, and it's so annoying, but I love to be inspired by the ingredients of the season, the
Hmm.
ingredients by the farmers that I know. If Kevin Gorman of Gorman Farms is like, Amy, I got the best tomatoes this week, then I'm taking all his tomatoes and I'm thinking about it from there. What can we do that highlights these tomatoes? That's my favorite thing.
Gotcha. So
Mhm.
you're in Chicago. So what's available right now? What's scening,
Yes.
because we're coming out of winter, so it's not, spring and summer produce is my favorite, but what's fresh right now and what's inspiring you?
That's what's so fun actually about living. I live in downtown Chicago. I live in a very urban area. And I just always say if I can shop local, if I can shop the farmers near me, literally anybody can
Right.
in a Midwest weather environment,
Hmm.
right? Yes, we go to Trader Joe's and the grocery stores for all our produce from December through now
Right.
because it's not available, right? And I wish it was, but it's not. So that's
Hmm.
okay. Um, but our farmers market is just opening. This last weekend was the first week,
Nice.
and it is all the spring goodness, right? It's the asparagus. I
Hmm.
love asparagus season, and I feel like that's what shopping the farmers market has taught me is the seasonality, right? So like
Hmm.
for 4 to 5 straight Saturdays at the farmers market, literally all you're going to see is asparagus on everybody's table. And the first couple weeks, you're like, this, I'm so happy.
Right.
Asparagus is, and by the 5th week, you're like, I'm going to die if I eat one more.
Yep.
And I love that. I actually love that rhythm because
Hmm.
then you close out, you say, for us, we show gratitude to the asparagus. We're like, thank you for that. Moving on, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah.
And it's like we rarely honestly eat asparagus after that. Sometimes for a
Hmm.
treat, we pick it up in the grocery store, whatever, but we're like, what's next? What's
Yeah.
next? And so it's asparagus right now. It's the spring peas.
Hmm.
It's the greens. My friend's a farmer and he grows all of the microgreens and the lettuces
Hmm.
and stuff in his hoop house. So those are ready in
Yeah.
early spring, which is so great. But it's really fun to watch in Chicago at the farmers market where, the first month, May, even to like early June, there's not much on the tables.
Hmm.
And I love that. It's like that's reflective of the earth. That's reflective of where we live. And by
Hmm.
like July to beginning of August, I got goosebumps as we're talking about early August here, Andrew.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always tell my husband we walk in like the end of July, peak season. It's
Hmm.
just like the tables are overflowing with fruit. We finally have fruit. We have vegetables. The corn is starting. And it's just, you can see the colors and the abundance. And there's just, everything is cheap because everyone has so much. And it's just, right, this is where we live. This is what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, I love that. I love the seasonality of shopping, even
Hmm.
in Chicago.
Yeah. No, and it is something, my wife and I have lived in mountain towns for the past
Mm,
10, 11 years now. And it's the same way where, you're
mm,
not, cold climate, high elevation, short growing season,
yes,
um, it is hard.
it's
But
hard. Yeah.
when you can walk in and see the plethora, um, especially in midsummer, from tomatoes, to
The
peaches to
best.
everything,
Hmm.
berries, it is beautiful.
It's the best. What's in season by you now?
I don't know yet. Our farmers markets are just starting,
Mm,
like obviously being close to Arizona, like you can probably find some different stuff. Some farmers might come up, but like farmers markets are just starting, and
Mm-hmm.
people are just starting to plant, like I think we've passed the last freeze finally.
Oh, let's hope.
No, right? Knock on wood. Probably we're gonna have a snowstorm next weekend because I just said something. But
Yep.
um, yeah, like we have two apple trees and a cherry tree on our
Mm,
property, and they're in full bloom and blossom. And so hopefully,
yeah.
it's a you know cherry season is good to us again. Like we had a huge bumper crop of sour cherries, and we still have frozen cherries in our freezer. Of like, okay,
Wow.
um, which has been fun to play with or try different jams or sauces and mustards even. So
That sounds amazing.
yeah, yep. So we're trying to get back into the gardening ourselves. We got
Mm,
planter boxes this year to try to grow some things.
yeah.
So yeah,
Nothing better than that, right? It's
no,
nothing better than growing your own things, and then when they're ready to eat and serve, it's just like literally nothing better.
no, and again, another thing that's jumped out is just the sacredness of
Mm,
soil through this
yes.
podcast of getting your hands dirty, and there's something about it as a talking to former pastors that when they got their hands dirty in soil, they found new life. Um,
Yes.
and so yeah, there is something about the seasonality in soil that does regenerate our own bodies.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, where we come from, the
Yeah.
land. And so I always think like the soil is part of us, the land is part of us, and we were all, created to coexist together and co-create this beautiful world together. And so when we are taking care of each other and the land and the animals and the water, then it's like the way it was supposed to be, and harmony exists, and everyone and everything is thriving. But it's when we don't, when we put our selfish needs above the land and the soil, etc., that nothing thrives.
No. Well, and that's a great transition because you're a big proponent, and your podcast is all about food equity and food justice issues. And so, what has that journey
Mhm.
been like? Because that's a completely different, not completely different, but it's a different avenue of experiencing food than just being in the kitchen and experiencing the
Mhm.
joy. Um,
Yeah. To me, my faith has always been connected to people who are hungry.
hmm,
And it feels to me like that is how Jesus maybe did things.
yeah.
And so I feel like I am in constant pursuit to learn more about why Jesus was so connected to feeding people, why the hungry were his people,
Hmm.
and all the magic that there is in connection, faith, food, bodies, all of it, when we not only like feed each other, but gather together at tables and eat together. And so that has just always been part of kind of my life and my faith. And when I founded the dinner church and got connected to people doing food policy specifically, it's just a whole nother world opened for me. And I started to learn, how important the advocacy side was, and how really everything affects food security, everything affects everything. So for
Hmm.
me, it's about food access and food choice. But really, when people lose the ability to have choice over their food or access to the food they want, also that is connected to their jobs, their employment, their
Hmm.
housing, healthcare,
Yeah.
social safety nets. I mean, everything,
Hmm.
right? And so, as I've moved deeper into this work, I've just realized for me, it's all about mutual care, and it's all about doing what I can to support people's access and power to their choices.
Hmm.
Because so often, I mean, poverty is absolutely ruthless.
Yeah.
It is designed that way, right?
Mhm.
And so the minute that you lose your job and lose income to be able to buy the food you need, you also lose access, most likely, to the choices that you would make, knowing your body, knowing your family's bodies, knowing the food that connects you to your family and your cultural traditions, et cetera, right? And so I'm just so committed to doing what I can in my work with my experience in my lane to increasing people's access to their choice for food. And I think so much of that is connected, obviously, to the money you have, the power you have, the privilege you have, of course, but also it's connected to making sure that people are able to have the dignity and the humanity to make those choices, right? I think for so many of us, if you've ever volunteered at a food pantry or worked at a food pantry, or even, seen someone asking for food on the streets, or, in Chicago here, every time I walk down the street or pull up to an intersection, someone is asking for food. And if you've ever been in any of those scenarios and you've had the opportunity to give someone food and they've said no, it is most likely instilled in most of us that they're ungrateful, that they should take whatever they're given. If you're hungry enough, you'll eat everything. And I think most of us move towards places of judgment and like, well, you should just eat whatever you're given, right?
Right.
And I think that's what we do in our country and what the system perpetuates in terms of taking people's choice and agency away from them. And I actually this was in my body too. And I have, moving in greater depths towards food equity in my city. I am constantly having to teach my body that narrative is not correct and right in what I'm working for. So now if I'm in my car and someone comes up and asks for food and I have a granola bar and I offer a granola bar and they say, no, I don't like that. I tell my body that I'm so happy they did that. I'm so happy in whatever this moment was for them and whatever season they are in their life right now, they had choice and knowledge enough of their body to say no to me to that granola bar. That is a really great thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me where I'm at in food equity. How is it that God created each of us to, you mentioned about like know ourselves more, know who we're meant to be, and exercise that agency and choice? Because in food work, it is completely taken away a lot of times. And of course, there are amazing food pantries, amazing emergency food places that are centered in choice. And I love that. I love that kind of work in order to really remind people, you know your body best. And even when you're hungriest and in the most stressful moment of your life, you still know your body best and you have the power and the agency to make choices for yourself.
Wow. I've rarely heard it tied, and I love how you made the connection, and it makes so much sense of tying it to human choice and dignity. And we're not here just to feed people,
Right.
but to restore their humanity, to give them agency. Because when your agency is taken away, it is soul crushing.
It's everything. Yeah.
Right. And so to tie food equity to choice and to agency and to dignity and not just handouts
No.
is such a beautiful picture and much more in line with who Jesus is and what the kingdom of God is. It's not just a free handout. It's human dignity. It's agency. It's flourishing.
Yes.
So these are big ideas, right? Like, and you listen to them and you're like, okay, I'm overwhelmed. Like I'm here in Flagstaff, you're here in Chicago. Like, what does Chicago have to do with Flagstaff? And like, I don't even know where to start. And so for our listeners, like, what does this mean on the very practical side? Like how do we use our agency to begin to restore other agency to people?
Yes. Great question. Couple of thoughts. First and foremost, I always tell people you just start today where you are and with what you have, because it's so overwhelming. And for me, when I get too into food policy and legislation and things are never going to change, I just fall into a deep pit of despair.
Right.
And I do nothing, honestly. I'm just like, what does anything matter? Nothing is ever going to change. What does it matter? And that's not where we want to be, right? So the way we start is just what is in front of me today. I told a friend this the other day. I said, yes, have your dreams, have your big plans, write them all down, be working towards those. But then today say, what is in my food? What is literally in my pantry today that I could share a meal with someone to use? Is because no doubt most of us have things in our pantry we could make a meal for someone today. Who are the people in my life today that I could feed tonight, tomorrow, etc.? You just start there, right? And I think that is key towards moving towards something. And it's like we all have to start with what we have and who the people are in our lives in order to really care for each other and even move towards bigger dreams and thoughts. And then I think, I mentioned before, food is my lane, and I'm going to stay focused on food, gaining more access for people and choice and food security. But it's everyone's whole life. So if food is not your lane, then think about, is it better labor practices? Is it higher wages? Is it more affordable healthcare? Is it social safety nets that actually benefit people and aren't, just unbelievably burdensome to use, like unemployment, like SNAP? And so what is it that is right in front of you that housing, oh my gosh, housing, like if you have skills or professional experience or know people, like just get working on access to affordable housing for all, people being able to choose where they want to live, etc. Housing is not my lane. And so I'm just going to encourage those to do it while I stay focused on food. But that's what we all need to do, is recognize poverty is ruthless. And the way out of this, the way out of everyone having what they need and being able to live thriving, wonderful, beautiful lives that they were created and intended for, is doing what we can do with what we have and also mutually caring for each other. And I think that's the other part of this that's so key is, I don't know if you relate with this, Andrew, but like all my beginning years of ministry, I shouldn't even say beginning years. This is only just the last few years that I learned this. Like ministry was so one-sided. I was the pastor who cared for everyone else's needs. And that felt so great when someone was hungry, when someone needed money, when someone, et cetera, right? But then when anyone would ask what I need, it was like, I'm fine. And I just think for those of us in positions working towards greater equity and greater access, we have to be in humble positions of mutual care, right? So I have been in a season of great need this last year, and so many people have fed us and supported us and loved us. And that was really hard. It was honestly really, really hard. I had not known that position before. But I can see how crucial that is. Now I feel like I am leading and dreaming and imagining a different world from such a different place after being cared for in such a way. And I think that is the way out of all of this. This is the way towards thriving, is being in a posture when it is your turn to give and feed, you give and feed. And when it is your turn to be fed and to receive, to be in such a humble position to be able to say, yes, feed me, let's go. Right? Because that is the way we were designed, and that is the way we move forward. It can't just be one-sided all the time.
No. Again, so much of what you're saying is eliminating the hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
You know, and realizing we're all co-laborers in this, and that we can't approach this from a position of white savior complex, but as, hey, we're in this together. and it's a mutually reinforcing circle
Yes.
that I don't lose when I feed, and I'm not lost when I get fed. But
Right.
we're all in this together to grow and to uplift our humanity.
Yes.
So can you say
Yes.
more of that? You don't have to share details, but you just mentioned your position and your advocacy work has changed because you were in a position of receiving. What did, how did that transform your work?
Yeah, I think I have felt it felt so good actually to receive, and I don't know why I resisted that for so long.
Hmm.
And in the moments of in the most stressful moments in this last year, in the most anxiety producing moments this year, I've come back to this mantra: I am loved and well supported.
Hmm.
And it's in that I can find peace. Like this moment feels totally unbearable, or like there's no way out of this moment. And I come back to that I am loved and well supported, and I can instantly bring back to mind examples from last week, last month, etc. Specific people who fed us, helped us, supported us, encouraged us, prayed for us, etc., checked in. And I think just that has grounded me so much in thinking about, you know, obviously I hope that everyone is loved and well supported, but what
Hmm.
about people who aren't? What about people who don't have family or friends or people in their life with resources to be able to feed them or support them or pray for them or check in on them? Then what? And I've
Right.
been thinking a lot about how emergency food is not only like nourishment and energy for the body, but also a way to establish those networks,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, how can emergency food centers be places of friendship and connection? And if you're
Hmm.
going regularly enough, there's someone who sees you and notices you and asks how you're doing, or if you need an introduction to someone for an interview, or et cetera, right? So I've been thinking a lot about that. People who don't have, is everyone loved and well supported?
Hmm.
And if not, how do we help to create more ways for that, right?
Right.
And I've also been thinking about how food, this last season, like food, this last year, food taught me that um, food serves many purposes. And I think so often we think about it only as nourishment, energy, calories, etc. And it is, but it's also rituals, connection, friendship,
Mm-hmm.
family, joy, memory in good and bad ways.
Yeah.
There's some food I've eaten in this last year in some of my lowest moments that I swear I will never eat again,
Hmm.
because they remind me of those low moments that I don't want to think about again.
Hmm.
And food
Wow.
serves that purpose
Yeah.
too, right? And so I've just been thinking a lot from that, as food has served so many purposes for me in this last year of stress. How do we think about that moving forward when we are feeding those who are hungry and we're feeding each other, because it could be that someone, similarly, like refuses canned goods at a food pantry because they remind them of all the other canned goods, and they're just like, I'm gonna need a break from all of these canned goods and this
Right.
memory.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really good and right and fair,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I think those are the main things that this last year has taught me. And I hope to be out of this season of stress very soon, but also, right, like we all do, I can see how it's teaching me and shaping me and growing me, unfortunately.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing and letting us glimpse into this season of your life. But yeah, our food tells a story.
Mhm.
I had the privilege of sitting down with Derek Weston, who I think,
Mhm.
he and Anna Woofenden, who's of. But he told that story of the food. Our
Mm.
recipes tell stories,
Yes.
and we have to come understand those stories, both good and bad, and I love how you tied that with the person who might have had so many canned goods that it's a story that isn't one of love and joy. It's one of despair and loneliness. Um,
Yes.
and so what are the stories our food tells us, and personally too, what's a food that has ministered to me that is a joy, but what's also a food that is like, man, nope, I can't touch that because it reminds me too much of this.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
Wow. So much insight, so much, I think that is worthy of unpacking more. But would love to hear this, and it's a question I love asking all my guests towards the end. Um, because it helps summarize sort of what our conversation has been about. But what's the story you want the church to tell?
Oh. Oh man. Okay. Um, I mean, to no surprise to you, Andrew, when people ask me now, what should I look for as I'm looking for a new church? I say, if it were me, I would start with a conversation with the pastor that asked, what is your food program?
Hmm.
And to me, that would communicate so much, right? Does the church know their neighbors? Does the church know hungry people within the church? We so often focus externally on people being hungry, but so many people in our church are hungry. What is the role of gathering together? What is the role of communion? What is the role of feeding each other during rituals? I mean, just so many things, right? And so I encourage people to think about, asking your pastor, what is the church's food program, and let the pastor define that and answer that as they see fit. And if there's nothing, if they say, oh my goodness, we have nothing, I don't know what that means. What do you think it means? If there is at least like an openness to, what that could mean or what that could be, then great. But for me, too many churches are preaching on Sunday mornings a great message of caring for neighbors, caring for each other, mutuality, being like Jesus, expressing the image of God in ourselves and each other. And this food component is completely missing. And it's like, well, how can you preach all those things and people literally go home hungry and without connection to each other?
Right.
So that's what I hope for. Of course, so many other things after. I hope church is sanctuary and safe and a place of beauty and love and all those things.
Right.
But that's where I would start these days. And I think, to me, feeding each other, thinking about hunger, and then all the things that wrap around that are, to me, how we are like Jesus, how we express our image. And so they go together with a well-preached sermon on Sunday.
Right. Because then you're part of this idea of the dinner church, which is a whole nationwide movement. Like it,
Yeah.
And so how does then the dinner church then inform? How does your gathering on Sunday then inform what you guys do in the real world, at a practical level, just to give our guests an idea of what this could look like?
Yeah. I highly recommend dinner churches because we all find spirituality and connection around dinners and tables anyway. So let's call it church.
Right. Yes.
Like my efficiency value. You can
Right.
get two things done.
Yep.
I finished pastoring Sunday Supper Church a few years ago, but while I was pastoring Sunday Supper Church and founding it, we gathered for dinners on Sunday nights and we had connection and food and then also a theme. And we were very social justice, activist minded. And our idea really was that you could pull up on a Sunday night, you could pull your chair close up to the table, feeling however you felt from the week and the day and your life. And at that table, ideally, you would find nourishment, connection, inspiration, learning. And by the time you pulled your chair back, I always think of like the chairs scooching on
Yep.
scooching back on the floor, and you got up from your chair and went back into your life, you were a better version of yourself than when you pulled up. And that caused you that betterness in you, that more connection to your image of God that was created in you, caused you then to fight for justice, to advocate for those who are hungry, to do what you could in your workplace, etc. I always saw pulling your chair up to the table as just a place we all needed to literally refuel and learn and be inspired so that we could go out. And as a pastor, I ask myself that every week, like, did us gathering at the table actually affect anything in our city and our communities? Because I wanted it to obviously affect our individual lives and our communal lives. But like, if we got up from those tables and went out and nothing was different in our communities, what were we doing? Right. So that was kind of just like my own check-in always. Is anything different because of our gathering? And it should have been.
No, it's such a great reminder, because church has become so individual focused of what's in it for me. And so, again, to encourage our listeners to think through, okay, as you go to church on Sunday or whenever day it is, or as you gather with a small group of people, how is that going to change the way you approach life with your neighbors, with your community? And again, like you, it's what's your lane,
Right.
Because you're not asked to change everything, but God has given you specific passions and joys. And so where are you going to impact and use that to bring about better good? And so, I hope our audience can begin to just think through, and again, you've given us a lot to think through of what does this look like, and how do we begin to see food as a system of totality, that's intertwined with poverty, that's intertwined with housing. And, if you're spending all your money on housing, that leaves very little margin for healthy, nourishing, life-supporting food. So, no, thank you for this rich conversation. Some fun questions as we wrap up, just because we're about food. What's one food you refuse to eat?
Sloppy Joes.
Sloppy Joes. That's a first. Is there a story tied up with that?
I literally will eat anything. That is the only food I won't. I just didn't like it as a kid. And it's some of that like childhood, stories your parents tell all the time. And so some days I think I should probably retry that, but I don't. So
fair enough. Fair enough. I wonder if you could do a tofu sloppy Joe.
And what's so funny is I love like a pulled pork, which I feel like is basically the same flavors. So I don't totally know, but it's like a whole legend now. And I'm going to keep that as my identity. I don't know why.
I understand. Fair enough. I love it. So then on the other end of the spectrum, what's one of the best things you've ever eaten?
Wow, so much. I love pastas. Just pasta to me is the essence of good food, because it's when it's homemade and it has like 3 ingredients, like the noodle, the pasta, the tomato, the cheese, a little fresh basil. It's perfection. And to me, that's, we complicate things so much, but when you have something so delicious and wonderful like that, perfect. A simple homemade pasta is everything.
Gotcha. With a few fresh heirloom tomatoes.
Yes.
Fair enough. And then finally, there's a conversation among chefs about last meals, as in if you knew you had one last meal to enjoy, what would you choose? So what would Amy's last meal and table look like?
I mean, I really don't like this question. It's so final.
It is.
I'm going to eat forever, Andrew. I'm going to eat forever.
We are.
There will be no ending.
But I think it again ties into the story of who we are, and it reveals something about who we are in our table.
I mean, to me, the perfect final meal is a long rectangle table with my family and friends. It's noisy, it's chatty, it's big family portions. Everyone's passing the bowls around, clinking the glasses. My husband is, like I mentioned, plant-based, and so a meal that there are no exceptions to. It's a perfect meal for him. It's a perfect meal for me.
Hmm.
Everyone in our table who has allergies and preferences, it's just like the most beautiful meal. Is this possible, do you think?
It's possible. It's hard, but it's possible. But just
Possible-ish.
like with all the
Yeah.
stories of food intertwined,
Yeah.
it's complicated, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. That to me, because it's
Mm,
just the connection is when you're all eating the same food and talking about it and tasting it. And I see so often my husband doesn't have the cheese and he doesn't have the meat and so suddenly like his plate looks different than the rest of ours, and he's doing
mm,
his best to talk, but and to me just like the ideal meal is everyone eating the same thing according to their preferences and talking and like, oh, the sauce, oh, the tomatoes, oh, it's just wonderful.
no, I love that picture, and it feels so apropos to our conversation where it's a table where everyone's welcome and they find their story and their needs and
Yeah.
their longings all met without feeling excluded or pushed away or inferior
Yes.
in any way.
Yeah.
So no, I love that picture you just painted, and
Mhm.
it wouldn't be an easy table to create, but
Yeah.
that type of table, it's never easy.
Yeah,
you know,
it's never easy. Right, 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 right. Yes. I don't know if people think that a lot, like it's easy for you because you do it all the time, or you know how to cook, right? I'm sure people say
right?
that to you,
Yeah.
and it's just like it gets easier. Definitely,
Mhm.
it's all about practice. It gets easier the
Yeah.
more you do it, but it's always a labor of love. It always takes time. It always takes resources, and I'm always a little nervous before
Yeah.
people come over. Always.
Right.
It's a very vulnerable thing to cook for people and to have them at your table. Oh, and to be at a table, to be at someone's table is very vulnerable. And so I just go
Hmm.
with that. Like the nervousness is appropriate, that it is a vulnerable situation. So we're not going to hide that. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's worth it.
It is. No, I always struggled with watching people eat what I cook, as a professional
Mm,
chef, just
yeah.
because it was like, I put a lot into this. And so, I think it's good and I have to rest in that. And so your
Yeah.
reaction, I can't base my
Right.
worth or identity on it, but I care. And so yeah, it was a very challenging experience.
Yeah, it's very vulnerable.
Hmm.
Now, I have one question for you.
Yes.
This is what you get with a fellow podcast
No, I
host.
love it. Yes.
I have a theory that people who know how to cook are the best dinner guests because you appreciate. Do you feel that way about yourself when someone invites you over? Are you gonna ooh and ah no matter what?
No, I'm always grateful. And it's people are hesitant to invite us over
Yes,
because I'm a chef. And I'm like, no, like any meal I don't have to cook is a great meal. Like,
absolutely. Yes.
and if you ask for pointers, I will give it. I won't offer any feedback because, you know,
Right.
um, but like, yeah, like again, because it's not about the food, it's about the people we're together with. And so, like, I just want to be with you. And so,
Yeah.
like, whatever you do is great because I don't have to go home and clean up. Like,
Yes. Right.
and so, no, yes, I love being invited. We love being invited over. And especially if you're going to care for our girls,
Mm,
or if you say, hey, it's an adult only, like, but, and feed us even better. And, so we can have adult
yeah.
conversations without our kids, it's a both
Yeah.
and, but like, yeah, Um, yeah, I love being a guest.
It's the best, right, and
Yeah.
you can taste all the love no matter
Mhm.
what,
Yeah.
right, and I appreciate that so much. Same thing, people say, I'm like, "I will be the best guest you have ever had at your table."
Right. Exactly.
I will talk about every ingredient and ask you for the recipe until everyone is kicking me out.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you, Amy, so much for this rich conversation. I hope our listeners, I hope you as a listener are thinking of ways where you can begin to think about your lane in food advocacy, or what does the table look like for you? Amy's given us a lot to think about. And so if the listeners want to get in touch or learn more about who Amy is and your work, where might they be able to find you?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for this conversation. So, I host the Feeding People podcast, which you can find at our website, widertables.com. And also on YouTube. We've got all the podcasts this year on video also. So, you can watch us on the Feeding People podcast YouTube channel. And also on Instagram, I am at _A Dolan, where I show what I'm cooking that night, restaurants I'm going to in the city, and my pit bull Maddox, of course.
Nice. Do you have a favorite hole in the wall restaurant in Chicago right now?
Oh, I almost every restaurant I love to go. I'm very selective about going out. I feel like it should be it should be good. I don't go out to I don't want to go out to a mediocre restaurant ever.
No.
This is not a hole in the wall, but this is my friend's restaurant in Pullman, Chicago. It's the Lexington Betty Smokehouse. And my friend, chef Dominique, she runs it and owns it with her wife, Tanisha. And it is just the most amazing barbecue, the brisket, I always tell people to go for the sides. Like I order every collard green, mac and cheese, French fry, the cornbread, everything. But Dominique and Tanisha are just like the most special people, and they fill their restaurant with that love. And so you got to check out Lexington Betty Smokehouse. Yeah.
So Lexington Betty Smokehouse for anybody in Chicago, or if you visit Chicago, check it out. Chicago has some great restaurants.
I mean, the best in my opinion.
I'm partial to LA, but hey.
Not even a chance.
Fair enough. We'll have to do it. Maybe we'll have to do food tours at some point and someday.
Deal.
And a showdown. So
deal.
Again, thank you so much, Amy, for joining us, and thank you, audience, for listening in and joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until the next time we gather around the table, bye.